I teach the literacy methods course. My students are first semester student teachers. So not only are they new to the program, they're new to everything, including lesson planning, and even for some of them just being in a public school classroom. So they're in anywhere from a kindergarten through a fifth grade level placement. They are all in different school sites all over Ventura County. And so to try and create a unified experience is challenging because they're all in very different settings with different student populations. So the purpose of this particular VoiceThread is to draw their attention to what we call anchor charts. And so the first part of the VoiceThread, I introduce them to what an anchor chart is. Oh, and let me explain, I'm sorry, one more thing. For my face-to-face classes, I've tried to, in a way, flip the course so that students engage in online homework modules that prepare them for the face-to-face session. So they get most of their content introduced that way through Google Classroom, and I use Popular to create the modules. And then that way we can do more practicum in the classroom where I can actually support them in the art of teaching compared to just the content of literacy. So there's a lot to try and get through.
Wow, that sure is a lot.
It's a lot. And then on top of that, they have a big state test they have to take at the end of my course that my course is supposed to prepare them for. They also have, there's just a lot on their plates, and they're very stressed out. Okay. So about week 3, they all crump and start to need a lot more support. So this assignment was getting them to analyze the public school classroom because they often have had experience working with children, but they don't have the experience of looking at a classroom through the lens of a teacher because there's so much that goes on. Everything is intentional in a classroom. It doesn't just happen. So anchor charts are, and I'll just close myself out. I'm talking to them, giving them instructions. I encourage them to pretend that they're a visitor walking into a classroom, and that when they walk in, they should be able to tell a lot of information just by what they see. So they should take a moment to consider their classroom. What are their students learning? What evidence is there of student thinking? What's valued based on what they see in the classroom and also what are the expectations? And a lot of this reflects what they're having to consider now with Common Core standards. Evidence of student thinking is huge. And critical thinking and Bloom's taxonomy, all the things that we constantly discuss, has to be evident in what's going on even in a kindergarten classroom. So, let's see.
And what about you?
Hey. So I'm continuing to kind of build the premise here of what do students get when they look around the classroom? Do they see reminders of their learning? Are there tools to support independent management of their thinking? And then also something that's important that student teachers don't always take into consideration is whose contributions are valued in the classroom. Is it the teacher's knowledge or is it the student knowledge? It's valued by what's up on the walls. So this explains basically what an anchor chart is. It's making thinking visible as you record strategies, processes, cues, guidelines, and other content during the lesson or the learning process. The big difference between an anchor chart and what you might have seen in public school classrooms previously, which would be, those pre-made posters and banners, is that anchor charts have to be created with the students. So they're called an anchor chart because it cements the learning and anchors students back to that learning experience. They have to be part of creating the chart in order for it to be meaningful. So this just is another piece that I was able to find of a brief explanation of what an anchor chart includes. So then the next slide is a scenario. So it explains the 2 types of charts that they can be looking for. Charts can either be content related or specific to supporting classroom management, because I don't know how much experience you might have had with teaching children, but both are equally important. If you don't have strong management, then the learning cannot occur. So student teachers have to learn to consider both. here's the scenario then. They are to pretend that they're in my position, a fieldwork supervisor, and that they've walked into a classroom for the first time, and they don't know what grade level or curriculum is going on prior to entering the room. When they get there, students are at recess, the student teacher and then the cooperating teacher are out of the classroom. And while they wait, they're to do some snooping and visually tour the walls in the classroom. So then what I included in the next few slides, I'll share with you in just a moment, are actual photographs from a classroom that I visited that has the anchor charts that are up in the room. So here were their directions. First, they had to look at all of the images, so all of the different slides, and consider the following questions as they did so. And then they were to select one image that they wanted to leave a comment on. My students, while I had not done a VoiceThread with them before, when I asked them, have you done a VoiceThread? They all were very comfortable with it. So I was very fortunate in that this was nothing new to any of them. So I just created a structure here that I wanted only 2 comments per slide so that everybody was sure to comment throughout. And then based on some of the modeling I had seen with what Michelle had done in some of our VoiceThreads, giving them some guidelines for how to create or prepare for their comment before they made it, and what I wanted them to include. So I wanted them to talk about the organization of the actual chart, whether it was a content-related chart or more of a management procedure, how they thought it might be useful to students, and then specifically if it was content-related, I wanted them to go back into the Common Core standards and try to find a standard, and then from there try to identify the grade level that this classroom might reflect. So they had to get analytical in the way they looked at the charts. Before they were to leave their comment, they were supposed to listen to what their peers said so there were not repeats. However, this direction seemed to fail to be followed, so I had a lot of Okay, and then I'll go. This is a lot of directions for them. And then here are the charts.
I will be focusing on the Read to Self independent chart. The chart has supportive words such as fun, learn, and better reader. There is a T chart with one half being the expectations of students during independent reading. So that's reading the whole time, staying in one spot, starting right away, read quietly, and work on building stamina. The other half is expectations of the teacher during independent reading, where the teacher is working with students. The chart is a procedural chart in which expectations of everyone in the classroom is clearly communicated. This keeps students on task, and the teacher can work with students without being disrupted. The chart serves as a reference for students in which they should always know what to do during independent reading.
Okay, so she spoke about this particular chart. I'm going to close this one out because this student didn't listen to the previous comments, so she does end up commenting on the same thing. So at first glance, since I have them summarizing it, it seems, I'll just
first thing that catches
different slides. So there were a lot of different options for the students to look at in different content areas. Part of my thinking behind it was just that it gave them one classroom that they could all experience at the same time, which is something we don't get to do. Even though we meet at an elementary school campus, getting them all to experience the same room is a challenge. Then I told them afterwards when they came to class, then we would talk about what the classroom actually was and what the experience was. At first, you know, as this was my first VoiceThread, and if I were to be critical of it to begin with, is it's a lot of just kind of letting them describe what they see. I would like to work this into more of a VoiceThread where I'd have them actually include then an anchor chart that they've created or one in their classroom and start to work from there. There was another component to this. I'll just share it with you, what we did in our face-to-face session. Here, go here. So after they experienced the VoiceThread and did the analyzing, they actually had to come back and create a lesson plan. to where they were going to be utilizing an anchor chart within their planning. So another piece of this then was through Google Docs ahead of time. I shared with them a lesson plan roadmap where they came in actually prepared for what they were going to be presenting. I had them select a text that would actually be coming up in their student teaching placement so that they were designing a lesson that they could use. And this was an example I shared with them from a book I presented to them in class when I modeled a lesson. So here was the sheet, the blank student sheet that they then had to fill in, helping them to think ahead, going into, through, and beyond the text. And then, let's see. They developed a lesson plan focused on reading comprehension. So I'll share, let's see, yeah, here's a student sample. So you can see their developed lesson plan based on this. What I actually wanted to show you was the other student, because here it is. I've gone through a lot of work in this class lately, changing all of the old documents to Google Docs so that they can be more interactive. So here's the full-time plan, but you can see what the student included at the end then are photographs of the anchor charts then that she created and actually used within her lesson. So here was her place to create and construct meaning based on what they'd observed in the VoiceThread. So they did get a chance to apply it, but I'd like to better construct the VoiceThread itself to support them uploading their photos into a VoiceThread. And then something else I noticed in the comments is they were not very specific about actually going back and citing a specific standard from the Common Core. And so I want to make sure in my directions to make that more explicit that they really need to do that. So that's kind of the overview of my VoiceThread attempt, because that was my first attempt. So
is anyone else impressed with that first attempt?
Yeah.
That's pretty wonderful, Megan. So who has some ideas for Megan? It sounds like you're interested in improving. Actually, Megan, why don't you go ahead and stop screen sharing so we can
okay, thank you.
see each other a little bit larger.
So what do I do to unshare?
Wiggle your mouse around and you should see stop sharing somewhere.
Let me see.
Where is Megan now?
I see it.
Okay.
Okay, there.
Perfect. So again, you're looking for feedback about maybe how to refine your instructions.
Yeah, because
and then also the ability to, or how to adapt the lesson so that it also includes a step where students can contribute images of anchor charts they've made.
I'd like to contribute, and then I want to up since this was my first attempt, when we talk about the taxonomy, I felt they were down in that lower level a bit. And so I want to make sure the directions, I think that was the problem, is that the directions weren't specific enough that they needed to analyze the chart further so they could tie it back to specific standards, state standards. Because I wanted them to apply, to work backwards basically from the chart, which they really could have been able to do, but it reminds me again of where they are in their development as teachers too. So it was a good formative assessment for me, for sure.
So who has any ideas for Megan or feedback?
Megan, I wonder if to be sure you achieve your objectives, you actually can show a sample. Like you have a first image when you are modeling the analysis.
That's a good thought. I was thinking about that. So thank you.
That's a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And Megan, just so you know, there's a feature in VoiceThread where you can actually create additional identities within your account.
Mm.
And what that means is you can toggle to that identity, and then when you leave your comment, that the avatar or the picture associated with that identity shows up. So I did that in one of my classes, and my identity was sample. It just was the word sample, like a little screenshot of the word sample. And so it was very visually communicated to students, listen to this before you go forward. But that will really help. Anyone else?
That's really good. No, and I'm always emphasizing to them the importance of modeling, because we're also working on of instructional design. So it could be Molly modeling or something like that. She
Yeah.
can pop up there.
That's good.
Okay, that's good to know.
Any
Where
other
would I find
suggestions?
that feature?
I can show you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to show you?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my VoiceThread page. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. And if you go up, let's see if they still have it in the same spot. Yeah. If you click on, in the upper right corner next to your name, there's a drop-down arrow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see that, but the second option is my identities. Yeah. And if I go there, see, I used to do all these, I had all these different feedback icons that I would toggle between when I was leaving responses to students in my classes. And I don't need to do that anymore, because now when you leave, the way it used to be in VoiceThread was if you left more than one comment with the same identity, your avatar or picture wouldn't show up more than once.
Okay.
So there was no visual indicator that you had done that. So that's why I used all this. Some people still use the feedback icons. I don't anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what the English one was for, to be honest. But yeah, so you basically, all you have to do is I could click on this now.
Uh-huh.
And if you look up in the right corner, now it shows that icon. And so if I were to go into, let's go here, and just make a comment on this slide here. Testing, testing. You see that that's what it says now.
Okay.
For that comment.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So it's a great way to use identities for something more creative.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maria, you use identities like that, right?
So yes, I have one that is, I think it says additional questions. As they are doing a presentation, I think in final project too, and I have questions. And I use at the beginning my real picture, but then I have one that is additional questions. So they know they have to actually answer. Listen to that versus just a plain comment.
Good tip. Good tip. And while I'm on this slide, I know I've mentioned this in previous gatherings, but we always get new folks. So I just want to mention it again. VoiceThread has this new feature called these threaded comments, and it allows for conversations to evolve within threads instead of just a linear sequence of comments. But that is something that you have to turn on in your in the settings of your VoiceThread. And the way you would do that is just go into, let me see if there's a more direct way to do it. I think, well, what I usually do is go into edit. I'm thinking there's a more direct way. And then over here under options, you go to playback options or playback settings. And that's where you can enable threaded commenting.
Okay.
The first option there. But of course, that's a whole different thing that you need to tell students are there. And that's why I've created that slide you were just looking at. And this is, by the way, a slide that I have shared in on that resource page that I showed earlier. So you could actually upload that slide into your own VoiceThread. Yeah, a little tip there for y'all.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Let's develop folders.
There is no way to make folders.
There is no way. That's a good question. Because I didn't have all these VoiceThreads there.
I know. Trust me. I have in my Gmail account VoiceThread, which I have a separate one for personal use, and I have, I think, like 500 VoiceThreads. And I've heard multiple people ask them for that feature, so I know that they know it's wanted, and hopefully it will appear soon, but I have no idea when.
Change them alphabetically or something?
You can sort them by the features up here in this icon. You could sort them by newest first, oldest first, and title A through Z or Z through A. So there is a way to sort.
Okay.
And then you can also just show those that are owned by you, which I know in most faculty that's primarily what's there, but sometimes when you start getting your students creating voice threads too, theirs are going to appear there. So it might be helpful just to go to Own by Me, because now I'm just looking at voice threads I've created. So those are a couple of tricks for navigating that space. Yeah, any other quick questions there about what we're looking at, or anything I can show you that might help?
I just did the identities, so that's really easy.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to my other identity before I start commenting with feedback and not realizing it. So, Megan, I had one more thought for you to consider. You may, since you're dealing with an image on a screen, it would be an extra step, but if you were to pull those images into PowerPoint or Keynote and make just a black box at the bottom with bullet points to kind of trigger the students what they're
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay.
That way they don't have to remember it.
Yes.
It'll be at the bottom, and it could just be describe what you, or listen to existing comment, describe what you see without duplicating content, and then align it or analyze the information and identify a standard or whatever you want to say. But that can really improve the quality of the comments, because students just forget, they get overwhelmed, and that cognitive load just kind of it's tough to remember all that stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great activity.
It was fun I'm looking forward to next semester, because it'll be the third time I've taught this class, and so I want to implement VoiceThread earlier.
Great.
Change out some things.
Great.
So, yeah.
Would it be helpful for anyone if I were to go in and show the share settings and how to turn on editing? I know sometimes that's something that
I just did that, so I learned that today. That's probably
okay. Well, let me just, since we have a couple more minutes, I'm going to go over there. If anyone has any other questions they want to ask, those in mind, because we'll probably have time. So I am going to open this is my handy dandy test voice thread of this adorable cat. I don't even have to open it, actually. So if I just mouse over it, there's a little icon that says share. Let me make this a little bigger for you. Okay, so that is the share button. If I click there on that arrow, that pulls up the share box. Now what I can do is basically already just go to who has access, and it's going to show me who I've shared this with. So right now I haven't actually shared it with anyone. So if I wanted to share it with a group, and by the way, every time you use VoiceThread and CI Learn, it creates what I'm calling a group for your class. And then as students come in and access the VoiceThread, they get added to that group. So that's the way that works. So all of these are groups that I have in here. I manually have one that I created called test group. So I can just click there. And now what it defaults to is it allows them to view and comment. And you can also manually click edit. So if you manually click edit, then it gives students the ability to actually have that. They'll have the pencil appear on the VoiceThread. They can go in and add slides. Some people get nervous because it also does give them the ability to delete slides, but I assure you it's not easy to do that. And I find that students are typically very conscientious about that, and I've never had that be a problem, and I've done lots of editing activities. So,
Michelle, I have a question. As I look at the screen with the comments and edit, last time I did a VoiceThread and I wanted to put a deadline, right? Like in any activity in CI Learn, you can say the forum close at 12 p.m., blah, blah, blah. We cannot do that in VoiceThread, right? So I said the deadline was Sunday night, but of course, a lot of the students on Monday, they were still making comments. So I kind of have to manually look at the time that they were posting. What will be your advice to?
Yeah, so what I've done in the past is I will go in and turn commenting off if it becomes an issue. It's one more thing that you have to remember, because that's not something you can scheduled to happen, but I have done that in the past. I've gone in and I've just disabled commenting, and then if students come in, basically what happens is they don't see the comment button anymore, and it just means that the deadline is passed.
You have to be sure the deadline is not like midnight.
Yeah, and I used to have my deadlines at 11 p.m. and I would just do it first thing the next morning. And if there were any people who came in late, and if that was a real concern, I might let them do it the first time, and then just send them an email and say, hey, just a reminder, this is the deadline, and next time, I won't accept the comments or something like that. But that's how I have managed that in the past if it becomes an issue.
Thank you.
You can also use Blackboard's built-in display settings and make the actual link disappear at a certain time, like you can with anything else in Blackboard. But the only thing there is if the student wants to still pop in and see the other comments that have been made, the whole link's gone. However, you could just do that, and then that'll kind of set as a reminder to you to go back in. You can make it visible again after you've disabled the commenting. Yeah. So just another route.
Yeah, and that also depends on how you have that link set up in Blackboard, right? Because you might have it set up as a link that goes to the course view, so they'd still have all that. So if it's a link to an individual VoiceThread, then yeah, that's an option too.
Right.
I usually link to the whole course. That way, as we do more VoiceThread, they always see the whole picture.
Okay, well in that case, then it doesn't really work.
Is it better to do like just by individual VoiceThread versus the whole course view? Or?
It's simpler, in my opinion.
I think it's completely up to you. What I do typically is I'll have a link in my navigation menu that goes to the course view, and then within modules there'll be individual links to individual VoiceThreads. Mm-hmm. So if a student's going through the module, then they'll actually know what they're supposed to do. But if they want to just kind of go in through the menu and see have access to everything, they have that option too. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? Any other questions?
I know, I just need to play with it more, so.
Yeah. I know, there's VoiceThread is, like I said, I've used it for almost 10 years now. And it is a deceivingly simple tool. It's easy to use, but there's so much depth to it, and there's so much you can do with it that I find most people just scratch the surface. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I love about it so much, because it can be just kind of a real simple, conversation space, but there's so much more you can do beyond that. It's really powerful, and so if you feel a little overwhelmed and confused, it's totally normal, because there's a lot of choices you need to make, when you're setting up these activities. And Megan, you've given us a great example of something that is so clearly instructionally designed so effectively. I think we're all just kind of going to take lessons back from you.
Thanks.